For those in HR, how do you fix recruitment bottlenecks like finding certified prospects or searching for essentially a unicorn with a very specific skill? Well, maybe it's time to look inward into your existing staff as a first step to rid these bottlenecks altogether. Today, Julie Schweber and I will be covering how to mitigate turnover in order to recruit less to begin with. Let's get right into it. So my question for you, Julie, is what effective retention strategies do you recommend for HR to actually reduce turnover and ensure employee loyalty within these very, very high turnover industries?
No doubt. And I'll tell you, I'll string it back to part of that recruitment strategy is developing or defining, if you don't have one, your employee value proposition. All right. And this kind of is step one, and this can go in your job ads, but it also becomes a retention tool. When we've identified what makes our organization terrific, what we do well, what our mission is, what great benefits, perks, or any other distinguishing characteristics or benefits or culture that we offer. Are we, hierarchical culture, or are we flat culture? What's our percentage of promotions from within? That's a story to tell, not just to candidates, but also to your employees. And it should be told. However, that makes sense for a business. Sometimes it's a quarterly team meeting, or it may be a monthly team meeting with the department, and then, an annual, hey, here's what we accomplished last year, or here's some of our key success stories. But it's important for employees to know their great benefits. And a lot of times, if they haven't been educated or even trained on how to use an HMO or whatever health insurance they may offer, or their retirement plan, or even the wellness phase that has really taken off since the pandemic, wellness benefits. It's great to have them, but if they're up on some shelf and nobody knows about them, it's not doing anybody any good. And they make up benefits often about 35% of one's total compensation package. So do your employees know about them? Do they know how to use them? Are we communicating on a regular basis? And then it's not just about the benefits, it's all the other things. Maybe it's the mission of your organization, or the outcome you're having on the community, or the world, what, depending upon what you're doing. Or maybe it's some of your corporate social responsibility, what you're doing outside of your organization to help the community, or a particular charity or nonprofit that you've dedicated hours or funds or whatever it may be. So making them realize there's a lot more to their world at work than just their paycheck that they get. All right. So that employee value proposition, I think, is a great retention tool. But again, it isn't told once a year. It's kind of an ongoing process, and making sure frontline employees are aware, or frontline supervisors are aware of it, and they can have conversations. Hey, I see you are interested in, IT down the road. Do you know we have a tuition reimbursement program? Okay. Or, here's some professional development courses, and here's what we have allocated in the budget. So they need to be aware of all these other things that we offer as an organization. And then, of course, the other piece is the culture. What is the culture of your organization? Can you articulate that? Are you surveying employees to find out what's working, what may not be working as well as it could be, and surveying and getting that data and trying to make improvements? All of these sends very powerful messages to employees that we care and we want to keep you. Stay interviews, that's another great retention tool. Somebody, once they've turned in their resignation, it's basically an autopsy at that point. It's kind of too late. But if we've got employees that we know we want to keep around, have a private conversation with them and say, hey, we value what you're doing. You're a superstar. We want to retain you. What can we do to do that? And listen. Not everything may be doable, or it may not be doable right away. And a lot of times it's not going to come down to money. It may come down to something else. Well, I'd like to collaborate and work with this team. I'd like to stretch my wings and do some, additional assignments over here in this department. explore and
Mm.
see what they may tell you. And listening to employees is kind of the final and frontier when it comes to retention. And even if you can't do it, you want to get back with them. If you happen to do a survey with employees, get back with them and let them know, hey, here's some of the suggestions. Here's what we're going to implement. Here's the things that, we're not going to be able to do because of XYZ.
I love that. Getting creative with your retention strategies, I think, is really, really important. And a lot of that creativity, like you said, comes from those conversations with your employees.
Mm-hmm.
It actually really highlights beautifully this slide that we have. If it will load.
Wonderful.
If it will load. There we go. There we go. All right. So this one, top 10 effective employee
Very
retention
good.
strategies. I think it's really speaks well to, a lot of what you talked about, even number, if I can find it, number 5, talking about those wellness, health wellness strategies, talking about, competitive compensation. Of course, bonuses are huge. I really like number 2, pair new hire with a buddy. I think that's really easy, especially for those early 30, 60, 90 days that the employee is there. Of course, thanking your frontline managers. That's huge. A lot of HR consultants and professionals have actually come on and told me about how they have actually handwritten cards in the past to their managers, even to their frontline staff who have come on and really kind of went above and beyond expectations. Handwritten notes go a really long way. And again, like number 10, of course, acknowledge new hire milestones. That is really, really important. I think those 30, 60, 90-day check-ins are huge for that, and acknowledging some of those milestones, taking a moment to sit them down, again, get that feedback. You can really implement that feedback, Julie, as you said, in really creative ways with some of these retention strategies that we're seeing here, and saying, is there a charitable donation you would want us to contribute to? Is there anything that you need to kind of better work-life balance principles that you have in mind? Anything like that, discuss with those employees, and I swear it will go a very long way. But these are just a couple of, effective employee retention strategies that we found here.
Absolutely.
Awesome. We talked a little bit about engagement. How can HR curate a culture of engagement a little bit better?
Yeah, that's always such a wonderful question. And, it kind of starts from when you're bringing them on board and getting them out of the narrow view of, this is my job and these are my tasks. But I find that it can enhance engagement and gets employees to understand the bigger picture of an organization. And that can kind of start, during the interview recruiting process, but also once they are on board, what that new onboarding looks like. Are we sharing, the strategy of the organization, our mission, our 5-year priorities and goals? Okay. And then getting into how their job relates to helping the organization as a whole achieve its objectives. And that should be talked about, also with their direct supervisor periodically throughout the year. Certainly if they're doing a performance review or frequent check-ins, quarterly or monthly, hey, here's our target goal, here's where we are, and here's how you are contributing to that. Yeah. Because then it becomes a much bigger than it's just about my little task and, hey, what's a big deal? Anybody can do this, versus, wow, I'm really part of this great team. Everything I do channels up to, meeting the goals of the organization. And I think listening, like you said, and showing appreciation. Thank you. We appreciate all your hard work, whether it's a thank you note or a verbal with a one-on-one meeting or in a team meeting. Everybody wants to be recognized. And finally, research has shown that, over 65% of employees want to do something that they feel is important to, whether it's, the workplace, their community, or the overall picture as a whole. So can we show them how we're making that difference with whatever it is that we're doing is important. They want to make a meaningful contribution. So let's make sure we're talking about that.
Absolutely. I think there's something to be said about feeling like you're really a cog in the wheel that is turning the organization, even if it's a small way, if the employee is doing more back of house things, or if they're even front of house. And, taking orders, whatever it might be, making sure that they're seeing the numbers, I think is really important. Saying, hey, you really contributed well in this sense. Look at what you've done for the company. This is really amazing. I think that transparency really goes a very long way. And again, improves that loyalty aspect to the company. And even if, the mission statement isn't necessarily hitting it right with the employees and they're just not connecting to it, that's fine, as long as they're connecting to the organization as a whole and feeling like, hey, I'm doing something for the company. I'm not just a sitting duck out here.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah. Were there any specific benefits or, retention programs that you've seen really, do well and obviously retaining employees with any organizations that you've worked with or, that you've recommended to HR professionals?
Yeah. I think if it's within the budget, some type of bonus program can always be well received, as long as the parameters are outlined clearly and employees know fully what's expected in order to earn it. It's normally not a given or an entitlement. It's, hey, or we make it tied to company success for that particular year. All right.
Mhm.
And communicating throughout the year where we are. Recognition and appreciation always go a long way. Promotions from within, getting employees teed up if they're interested in exploring how to obtain other skill sets and credentials or certifications or education.
Mhm.
Okay, can be all good tools to help, I think, with that. Some companies have like a leadership and training program. And for anybody that's interested, they will kind of do monthly or even quarterly training sessions where it's getting folks who are interested into moving into a supervisory role, for example. But it also talks about the organization's culture, their internal policies. They're already well versed in all of that anyway, but then it gets into supervisory skill set 101, for example.
Mhm.
So it's a great way to keep that pipeline. And it's another powerful message that we want to keep you. We want you to grow and continue to learn with us. And it doesn't necessarily have to be in a supervisory role, depending upon an organization. Maybe it's, gee, I'm over here in department Y, but I've got a similar skill set and I'm interested in department Z down the road. Wonder what I can do. Can I work on or collaborate with a couple of workers in that department? Or be assigned for a temporary role for 3 months, depending upon, the circumstances. So always looking to grow. I think professional development is one of the key job retention tools that employers have. And
Yeah.
it's one of the reasons people leave too. If they're not being professionally developed, they leave.
Right. They get bored, they get stagnant, whatever it
Mhm.
is, they're not going to stick around. They don't feel important to the company's progress
Right.
anymore. So, yeah, why wouldn't they look somewhere else and, start from another entry level position because they obviously haven't moved from their own.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So
Exactly.
true. We talked a little bit about, work-life balance principles, and I think that ties a lot with flexibility and scheduling. So how can HR introduce the idea of flexibility to help reduce turnover?
Yeah, I mean, that is also right along right along with professional development. That's another
Mm,
big one, and we've seen it with the pandemic. But the reality is not every job can offer a flexibility or work from home. It's just going to depend upon the business, the customer needs, and employee needs.
yeah.
But we're not going to have any customers if we can't meet their needs out there. So sometimes employees have to remember. Oftentimes, an employer may want to have a standard policy or a practice and make employees aware of what are the criteria. And set some employers might have core hours. Everybody's got to be on deck from say 10 to 3, and have those conversations with your supervisor. And usually HR and leadership will set some guidelines. Here's what we need. And maybe brainstorm with the frontline supervisors and figure out how we can offer the most flexible schedule while
Mhm.
meeting customer needs. And sometimes, maybe it can be early morning hours or later in the day, and each of us is a little different and has different needs. What work for us, but I would certainly explore it
Mm.
while meeting, while meeting business needs. What can we do to be more flexible? PTO, big dot deal right now, obviously, and being flexible. Folks will usually give you, 110% if we give them a little flexibility when they need it. Whether it's for childcare, elder care, they're sick, whatever the situation is, they tend to give that back tenfold when a company is flexible too.
Yeah, I think the concept of flexibility and benefits really go hand in hand. It's often not looked as it so much, where maybe today employees, especially younger employees within these shift industries, are kind of expecting some sort of flexibility. And a lot of companies, especially smaller companies, don't necessarily have that because they don't have the technology, they don't have the software to do so. We actually have the shift swapping feature, and I was talking to Natasha. She's the manager over at My Health. They have an 800 staff medical center, and they use the shift swapping feature to, obviously swap shifts within employees. They're able to swap them with each other, obviously within the context of qualified employees. And it takes the pressure off of obviously managers and, at the end of the day, HR, to go in line with the topic of this whole conversation. But it's a
Right.
huge benefit that they
Yeah.
actually tout when they're recruiting. And it's really easy because, I mean, all the work is done on the technology side of things.
Nice.
Managers just need to approve it. They're like, oh, that's fine. Check, all good. HR doesn't need to do virtually anything. It's all done within, the software itself. So I never really thought of flexibility as the technological aspect of it as a benefit as a whole. Because if you go from a place that has something like the shift swapping feature, and you go somewhere else that doesn't, that's going to be a pain. That's going to be so annoying to have to adjust back to go back to, hey, can anyone take my shift on WhatsApp? Hey, can somebody help me out here on Slack, whatever it is, and to have to kind of comb through it and then email your manager, and then your manager turns it down because it's been a couple hours, whatever it is. That is such a pain for everybody across
No
the board, for
doubt.
the employees, for the manager, for HR, because they're definitely getting probably an earload of complaints regarding on how frustrating it is to swap shifts because something came up or something happened, whatever it is. But yeah, that aspect of work-life balance, of retention in this case, it's huge, and it really correlates with flexibility and scheduling. I mean, it's so huge, and I really never thought of it until, stories like My Health kind of came about, and I was like, that's totally a selling point that HR can tout, and that's huge.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So in terms of feedback, we did touch on this a little bit, but how can HR garner feedback from frontline employees without sending out a million employee surveys and then chasing them down for an exit interview? Because, as you said, by the time that they, submit their leave, or, they're saying, hey, this is my last day here, it's too late, right? You're kicking a dead horse at that point. So how can HR garner that feedback a little bit more effectively?
I mean, I'll share, a couple of ideas, and certainly small group meetings, anywhere from 5 to 15 or 20, and maybe provide some type of snack or meal, lunch or breakfast. And it's just HR, and you've got a couple of questions, smaller group, and ask, hey, what do you like most about working here? What don't you like so much about working here? What can we do to improve? What's on your mind? What obstacles are experiencing? And their frontline supervisors, although sometimes you're funny about griping or, making any suggestions to your frontline supervisor. So sometimes HR can get that. And I would do several group meetings, kind of take notes, let them know right out the gate, I am not taking names. This is anonymous. But I'll go back to my notes as I'm typing those in and say, oh, geez, 10 people said this. 5 people said this. 1 person said this. I'm going to put this to the side. And then I can summarize that data without identifying who or which department, but share it with whoever it might be, the frontline supervisors, the leadership team, and maybe even come up with some of my suggestions based upon that feedback, some simple, quick hits that we can maybe improve upon. Another thing is, depending upon the business, I know I used to make myself available folks were sorting packages on the sort, or loading up, the deliveries for the day, and that, maybe just walking around, and if it was new folks and I hadn't met them, I would introduce myself and say, hey, I'm the HR rep here, or hey, Mary, how you doing today? What's going on? And you'd be surprised, being out there on the floor or wherever it needs to be, depending upon the organization, you do get a sense of what's going on, what's on employees' minds, or what they may be struggling with, and you get a pulse of what's happening. And you want to do that more than once a year, because then it's like, why is an HR person walking around? So you're kind of developing that rapport with employees, and you're establishing that relationship so that, if there is something, they're going to feel a little bit more comfortable. Oh, I just saw her last week. She said hello, and they can reach out, or sometimes they'll just start talking right then and there, and that's okay too. But keeping a pulse on what's going on with employees. And it can also be the frontline supervisor or the next level above. Okay. It shouldn't be something that we do once a year, because then it's like, why is the VP here? They get nervous about it. So maybe, more regular presence, and trying to develop some type of transparent communication where folks are comfortable. Okay. And I would even put, my contact information so that they, like in the break rooms, because it was a multi-site, business, and we had locations all over the place. So, you're not going to be everywhere at once, but you can kind of put your, hey, information, if you need questions or any assistance.
Open door.
You're an open door policy.
Yeah,
exactly. So
yeah,
that would be my suggestion.
I love that, because again, when we're talking about making sure that you are communicating with your employees, you have those ideas for retention strategies, and we'll kind of go into this next part in a little bit, but finding that hidden talent, finding those adjacent skills. And the only way you're actually able to do that is by talking with them. And of course, it benefits on the survey side of things, but it also benefits the company as a whole in a lot of different ways. And for those that are thinking, I don't have time to talk to employees multiple times, a year, even if you're already down to once a year, let's say. This is why this webinar is here, right? Making sure that you are streamlining your recruitment process, taking out some of the admin work, taking out some of that burden to alleviate yourself from that, so you can self-audit your processes, you can improve on those processes, you can talk to your employees, your frontline staff more to figure out what those processes needs. It's all about lightening the load on the admin side of things, whether that you're turning to software for that or otherwise. It's all about just making sure that you have the time to talk to employees, talk to frontline staff, whatever it is, just improve on those, like I said, those processes is absolutely key here. And I hope, like this webinar will be a good resource for people to actually turn to and say, all right, what can I do to help alleviate the workload a little bit?
Right. And you just hit on a great point too. It's about HR becoming more strategic and less tactical with the admin stuff, right? Ultimately, that's what HR folks are looking for, and we can add a little bit more value when we can come up with, hey, here's what's going on, here's what employees are concerned about before it escalates. Okay, before it escalates, because we now have the time to do that, because we've automated and got rid of some of that day-to-day admin stuff.
Thank you so much for watching that segment from our webinar on how to make recruitment less painful for HR. If you would like to watch the full webinar, click this video here and be sure to subscribe for more content like this.